Alright, I am back with another video, and today I wanted to do something a little bit different. I love wild magic in tabletop as well as Baldur's Gate. I think the addition of just random fun effects actually can elevate certain parts of gameplay and roleplay. For example, in my own long-running Call of Cthulhu campaign, I gave my players a small bag that, when opened, you could pull out random knickknacks from that had varying effects, all of which were pretty much useless unless the players could come up with creative uses for them. Which is why I love random tables like this, just because I think it adds just that little bit of flair that you as the DM might not even see coming yourself. It gives you the ability to adapt on the fly and, have a bit of fun with it the same way the players do. And as such, when I look at the wild effect tables for Baldur's Gate 3, that being the one for the sorcerer and in this case the wild magic barbarian, I really wanted to kind of look at that and come up with a build based on it. And when I was looking at the wild magic table for barbarian, I noticed something. There are 3 prominent damage types that are used in the wild magic table: force, radiant, and necrotic. So I made it my goal to make a build that takes advantage of all 3 of these damage types, whether adding more of it on or using those damage types to gain certain effects, so that no matter what you roll on the wild magic table, you're getting a bit of a benefit somehow. Because while all of the wild magic effects for barbarian are beneficial to the most of the time, I really wanted to make it so that our equipment and such actually took advantage of when those things appear. So I've decided to build a wild magic barbarian today just with this fun bit of flavour, and as it turns out, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a high level barbarian. It's still going to be quite powerful. We're very tanky, we've got a decent damage output, and we've also got some fun extra strategies here and there. So without further ado, let's get into the build. I've decided to play as a dwarf today. No particular reason, but the amount of times I've made wild magic dwarves on this channel, now that I think about it, I've done that quite a lot. But regardless, I wanted to play as a gold dwarf today so that we could gain that little bit of extra HP to make us a bit more tanky. As well as we're going to get things like advantage on saving throws against poison and resistance to poison damage, which is always nice to have, as well as some other stuff that we don't really need to worry about. And of course, we're going to be kicking things off as a barbarian today, giving us access to rage, allowing us to do extra damage and gain those physical resistances, and unarmored defense, which we won't actually be using today, but you could if you wanted to. Now, moving on to our stats, we actually have a pretty typical barbarian spread today. Strength and constitution are both at 16 because they are our main stats, and we're leaving dexterity at 14 because we're going to be using medium armor that doesn't have an uncapped modifier thingy, so 14 is the most we're going to be able to get out of it, and to be honest, that's perfectly fine. Intelligence is at 8 because we don't need it, though I do want to try and make more builds that incorporate intelligence, because I definitely feel like it's the stat that I'm always dumping. I mean, outside of the obvious, like Eldritch Knight, Wizard, etc, etc. So I'll have to look into that a bit more in the future, like how to make intelligence a good substat. We'll have to see. Wisdom and charisma both at 10. I would have had charisma at 12 because I love my barbarian intimidation checks. However, lots of the kind of starting proficiencies for barbarian are wisdom based, so I thought instead of having those all be negative to start, we could just have this at a 10-10 split. Speaking of, let's have a look. I've gone for the soldier background today, giving us intimidation and athletics. Athletics I really did want because I want to be able to jump around quite a bit, and we're also going to take whatever kind of 2 proficiencies that you like. I would say let's go for survival and perception. At level 2 of Barbarian, we're going to gain access to Danger Sense, giving us advantage on dex saving throws against traps, spells, and surfaces. That spell part is particularly useful, as it's going to make us a bit more tanky against things like Fireball. We're also going to get Reckless Attack, giving us advantage on attack rolls until the end of our turn, but enemies will also have advantage to hit us. We're pretty much going to have this on all the time, because, I mean, look at the weapon we're using. We might as well pick up Warlock Master so that we can use that without really getting the penalty. So we're going to get hit quite a lot, but believe it or not, by the time this build is done, we're actually going to want to get hit, so having that advantage against us isn't a huge deal. At Barbarian level 3, of course, our subclass is going to be Wild Magic, although I do need to play with some of these other ones more. But regardless, Wild Magic. Whenever we rage, we get to cause a random magical effect, and then we get all the usual rage bonuses on top of that. So the Wild Magic effects table varies from a few things, like adding extra force damage to our weapon, giving weapons the thrown and homing properties, meaning that we can throw them, deal extra damage, and then have them return to our hand, firing a radiant bolt of light out of our chest, summoning shadowy necrotic necrotic tendrils that spill out and can potentially heal us. Like, there's a bunch of different interesting things that this can do, and again, that's why I wanted to kind of make this build based on that. We're also going to gain access to magical awareness. As a bonus action, anyone within range has their proficiency bonus to saving throws against spells. I believe this is once per short rest. It's cool. It's not great, but it can help make up for the barbarian's lesser, lesser mental saves, I guess. Yeah, that's the problem with Wild Magic Barbarian. Other than the Wild Magic table itself from the Rage, you don't really get much else out of the subclass features, but let's continue. At Barbarian level 4, we're going to gain access to our first feat of the build, and I would say at this point we're probably still at the kind of stage of the game where 16 strength is going to be pretty good. So I would say it's up to you if you want to go for an ability score improvement to your strength and go for an 18, or scroll all the way down here to Polearm Master. When attacking with a glaive, halberd, or quarterstaff, or spear, or pike, even though it's not listed, it does work, you can use a bonus action to attack with the butt of your weapon. You can also make opportunity attacks at targets that come within range. That butt attack will deal in 1d4 bludgeoning damage. Overall, it's a pretty solid ability. We're mainly going to be able to get some battlefield control out of this, being able to attack people who come near us before they get a chance to hit us, which is always nice, and getting that extra bonus action attack to just deal that little bit of extra damage when we're not really going to be using our bonus action for much else. It feels pretty good. Some wild magic effects will use our bonus action though, so there's not always going to be an opportunity to use this, but hey, since I wanted to go with a halberd for this build, I feel like getting Polearm Master is a bit of a given. At Barbarian level 5, we're going to get extra attack as well as fast movement to increase our movement speed by 3 meters while not wearing heavy armor. At Barbarian level 6, we're going to get an additional Rage Charge, as well as Bolstering Magic Boon, allowing us to give ourselves or an ally, for 10 turns, a 1d4 bonus to attack rolls and ability checks. This is a nice feature that costs an action for some reason. Why? Why is this not a bonus action? I know we already have the Rage as a bonus action, but we're never going to do this. Like, I don't know. I use it outside of combat before I go into a fight, so I get 9 or 10 turns of, extra kind of ability checks and attack rolls things. I mean, the ability checks thing is useful outside of combat too, actually, now that I think about it. It's basically a guidance. But you're going to have guidance in the party, so I don't know. This one has its uses. It can help with things like Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter as well, with that little bonus to attack rolls, but otherwise it's not great. However, you're definitely going to want to be pairing this build with a spellcaster of some kind, be it a wizard, sorcerer, cleric, druid, what have you, maybe even an eldritch knight, because we're going to get bolstering magic level 1 and level 2, allowing ourselves or an ally to recover a level 2 spell slot, or a level 1 spell slot, depending on the ability that you use. Although these both cost an action still, which is, I guess you're going to use it outside of combat. I mean, again, giving a character that doesn't have spell slots the ability to recover spell slots seems a bit strange. But again, I've multi-classed this subclass with full spellcasters before, like the Wild Magic Sorcerer, in which case you can definitely get some use out of it, but otherwise you're going to want to be pairing this up with someone else in your party who can make use of those spell slots. At Barbarian level 7, we're going to get Feral Instinct. You have honed your instincts to the utmost degree. You gain a +3 bonus to initiative and cannot be surprised. Amazing feature, always love it. At Barbarian level 8, we're going to be able to grab our second feat of the build, and at this point, let's bump up that strength. At Barbarian level 9, we're going to get a couple of things. Let's get the weird one out of the way. We can now recover a level 3 spell slot for one of our allies. Yay! We're also going to get Brutal Critical. Whenever we land a critical hit, you can roll an extra damage die as well as the normal additional critical dice. Means if we crit, we get more damage. Very nice. And then at Barbarian level 10, this is the feature that I really, really wanted to get. Unstable Backlash. While in rage, I should say, when you take damage or fail a saving throw, you trigger another wild magic effect that replaces the cover one. There's no, resource cost to this or anything like that. Every time you take damage, you can spend a reaction, I guess, which I guess it does cost a reaction, but yeah, to just repeatedly get more wild magic effects. Now you can cycle through all of these awesome and cool effects just whenever you want. If you rolled one that's not ideal to your current situation, you can just get a smack on the chin and roll again. This is such an amazing feature that I wish came in a little bit earlier, because I feel like it would just make the multi-classing potential of this build a lot better, because I feel like, again, Wild Magic Barbarian, if you really want to get the most out of the gimmick, you do have to go to high levels in it, similar to the Samurai that I've talked about before. So, I don't know, I love this feature, I just wish it was a little earlier, but at the same time, I understand why it isn't, because some of these effects are pretty damn good. Now here's the thing. I would say at this point you technically have 2 levels to multiclass. I would say, especially with equipment boosting items and such like that, like maybe the Potion of Everlasting Vigor, you don't really need a 3rd feat on this build. Obviously we haven't picked up Great Weapon Master yet, and if you go all the way on Barbarian, like I did for this build, we're going to be picking up Great Weapon Master as a capstone, because I feel like getting that last big boost in power towards the end of the game doesn't make it feel too powerful. But I would say you've got a lot of multi-class dip options to really give you more to work with. Of course, any of the spellcasters works really nice. Wizard especially, because you have just a lot of spell slots with that one. Prepared spell slots, I guess you could say, to prepare more spells. Maybe you'd have to bump up your intelligence somehow. Warped Headband of Intellect exists. Sorcerer can do a similar thing, so just picking up utility spells or such like that. Druid or Ranger may have something for you. Fighter for fighting styles and action surge. There is a lot you can do. Heck, I would even say cleric levels feel appropriate. In fact, you know what would be a funny thing? Take a 1-level dip of cleric, and then take a 1-level dip of warlock. Just because that's going to give you, like kind of good and evil, like, dialogue checks, like one for warlock and one for cleric. And you can kind of play that as the, like, radiant and necrotic damage, like, coming from 2 different sources that are vying for control over their chosen patron or something. Like, you know, have some fun with it. But I would say, for the sake of this build, I do think it is the most beneficial to go full Barbarian. And some of you may think, well, yeah, that's probably right, but that's incredibly boring. Is this not a build-making channel? You're supposed to be more interesting with this. But I'll tell you what, as someone who's made probably nearly 300 of these bloody things at this point, I'm having a lot more fun with single-class builds than I am with multiclassing. I never get to play with the late-game features of these builds because I always multiclass before getting them. Like, and now that like, for example, the Anti-Mage, or the Mage Slayer, or whatever I ended up calling it, I can't remember, that came out recently, that was a single-class Warlock build, and it's one of the most fun builds I've played. And people seem to agree, that video is one of my most popular in recent memory. So I do think there is room for single-class builds in these games. While multiclassing is fun, and obviously it allows for more build expression and creativity, especially as we're going to be getting more subclasses with patch 8 and with mods and such like that, I do think there is value in simplicity. Like I say, going to level 10 of Wild Magic Barbarian gets you its best feature that really makes the subclass stand out and in a league of its own compared to things like Berserker or Wildheart, right? I don't know. I mean, again, you do kind of come with the problems, though, that Barbarian is a fairly simple class already, basically just being attack, take hits, not too much else going on, with Magic being, honestly, the most complex, in my opinion, because you've got to think about how to use the different buffs and debuffs most of the time. So, I don't know. I just feel like, but I do feel like that there is beauty in simplicity. Going for single-class builds may not seem that interesting, but especially with how this game handles equipment and how you can do build expression that way as well. My voice is starting to go already, god damn it. I do think there is value here. So honestly, consider single-class builds, even if they don't seem that interesting. Because trust me, they are. Because at level 11, we're going to get Relentless Rage. Once per short rest, if you drop to 0 hit points while enraged, you regain 1 hit point instead of being downed. Crazy that this is a level 11 Barbarian feature, and the upcoming Shadow Mage, I think, gets this at level 1 or something, like really early. I don't know, it's kind of funny. And then finally, at Barbarian level 12, we're going to get an extra Rage charge, which means we can rage more times per long rest, as well as our final feat of the build, in which, yes, we are grabbing Great Weapon Master to give the build a powerful capstone. Because we have Relentless Attack, and even our Bolstering Magic, we're going to be able to offset this -5 attack roll penalty to get that extra damage for free. It also builds upon Polearm Master, meaning that whenever we land a critical hit, which does extra damage because we're a high-level Barbarian, or kill with a melee weapon attack, we can make an additional attack as a bonus action, not having to make that weaker butt attack. We can upgrade that to a full attack. So it's almost like by the time we finish this build, we've like mastered the halberd, which I think is very fun. And that is the build. Overall, what you're getting out of this is, well, it's a max level gold dwarf barbarian. You've got a decent pool of HP. You're going to be incredibly tanky most of the time, thanks to your advantage on dex saves and your resistance to physical damage. And you're going to get all the benefits that come from the wild magic table. You're going to be firing radiant beams of light, Iron Man style. You're going to be attacking and throwing weapons around with force damage. You're going to be summoning frickin' Hadar somehow. You're even going to be able to summon little flumps, which are like these weird jellyfish things, and they explode. You get kamikaze flumps. Listen to how my voice has changed. You listen to me, you get kamikaze flumps, the most dangerous and wild strategy ever that is exclusive to this subclass. And because you're also a level 10, you're going to be able to change out these abilities for free just for doing what a barbarian already does, creating absolute chaos on the battlefield. So please, give a fully leveled wild magic barbarian a try. But like I said, I would say those last 2 levels are free, and you could be taking multi-class dips anywhere in this build that I think could be interesting. Like I say, the cleric warlock dip, oh my god, warlock dip would definitely be kind of a fun thing if you want to go down the roleplay outlet for this. Because again, I love the idea of this like kind of like old battle rager dwarf suddenly being the chosen of a deity, but at the same time having to make a deal with a pact, like with a demon or something at the same time, and now they're vying for control. I had this old D&D character concept where there was a guy who is basically, his father was in a long line of like paladins, and they were all in service to a god, even the children, before they even gave consent. But the mother had made a deal with a hag to have like the firstborn or something. So now you've got the hag and the deity vying for power over this child. I don't know, it was a fun concept, but I'm getting way off track. Let's talk about the equipment. So first off, this one may seem rather obvious, but we've got the Halberd of Vigilance today. The Halberd of Vigilance is a +2 weapon that you can pick up in Act 2 pretty early on, actually. It comes with an additional 1d4 of force damage built in, so that's where we're getting our extra force damage from, in theme with the build. And it also gives us a +1 bonus to initiative rolls and advantage on perception checks. So even with our middling dexterity, with our barbarian features and this, we're actually going to be pretty high in the initiative order, which is great. That means we can rage earlier. And whenever you make an attack roll as a reaction, which we do with Polearm Master, pretty often we make it with advantage, which again is another way to help offset the Great Weapon Master penalty. Overall, it's great. Barbarians love this weapon, and so do I. But moving on to our ranged weapon, we've got the Fabricated Arbalest. This is going to come as a +2 heavy crossbow, giving this ability to use Illuminating Shot. This is a free bonus action attack, but allows us to do 1d4 piercing damage at range and inflicts Radiating Orb. Radiating Orb gives the affected entity a -1 to attack rolls for each remaining turn, and sheds a bright light in the area surrounding it. So basically, we're going to be able to inflict a pretty significant debuff on our enemies, meaning that they're going to have a harder chance to hit maybe our allies, for example, because we're still going to be taking damage because of reckless attack. They're going to have advantage to hit us, even with the penalties, they'll still have a high chance, but this gives us a great bit of support utility. It's also going to come with Dazzling Ray, allowing us to, as an action, shoot a, well, it's basically a diet version of Sunbeam that can potentially blind people, and you can recast it, but obviously it's concentration, so if we rage, we're not going to be able to keep it up so much. But you could kind of use this on your first turn and then rage immediately after, just to get a quick, bit of radiant damage off, which will help. Again, that's kind of helping fulfill the radiant damage requirement here. What's also helping with that is the Holy Lance Helm. Creatures who miss their attack rolls against the wearer must make a dex save or take 1 to 4 radiant damage. Now, that you may be thinking, how the hell is this useful when you're using reckless attack all the time? Well, you don't have to use reckless attack all the time, for starters, especially if you decided not to take Weapon Master, in which case you don't really have to. And because we're inflicting the Radiating Orb debuff, attacks will miss more often than you realize. I found that in my combat testing, even with reckless attack active, attacks would still miss us. We're pretty hard to hit, and I'll explain that in a minute, because you'll see. But with this, it just means we're getting extra radiant damage, which will synergize with more things a bit later. And again, it feels so chaotic, but like you just instinctively dodge an attack and the enemy's like, what? And then your wild magic lashes out and just bops them with a bit of radiant damage. It was like a surprise bitch slap of radiant. It's kind of fun. But that's because we're pairing this with the Cloak of Displacement. At the beginning of the wearer's turn, the cloak activates, granting enemies disadvantage on attack rolls that target the wearer. This effect lasts until the wearer takes damage. So, even with if we have reckless attack active and this comes up at the start of our turn, our enemies will have neutral chance to hit, not disadvantage. So this cancels out the penalty of reckless attack, and if you're not using reckless attack, enemies will have disadvantage against you. So you're going to be able to not only dodge attacks, but also basically choose when to take them as well to trigger your unstable backlash. So you're going to want to take hits, but at the same time, you can avoid taking hits if you want to. That's about as tanky as it gets, choosing when to take hits and when not to take hits, which I think is really cool. Moving on to our armor, we have the Luminous Armor. When the wearer deals radiant damage, they cause a Radiant Shockwave. That Radiant Shockwave inflicts Radiating Orb on all enemies in a 3-meter radius, which you already know what Radiating Orb does. I would say this is optional. If you don't want to lean as much into the Radiating Orb thing, especially once you get the Fabricated Arbalest, you can swap this out for something else. Adamantine Splint Armor immediately comes to mind for the Reeling effect, which could also help with dodging. So, up to you, but again, this fits the theme a bit more, so I wanted to show it off here. Moving on, we got the Dark Justiciar Gauntlets, giving all of our weapon attacks an additional 1d4 necrotic damage. So, our halberd is doing an extra 2d4 of damage, 1 of force, 1 of necrotic, in addition to all of the Polearm Master bullshit, so yeah. Or, I should say Great Weapon Master, so we got a lot of extra damage here. And finally, there were no boots that really worked with this build, if I'm going to be 100% honest, other than the usual stuff, so I just gave us the evasive shoes to round out our AC to a pretty decent 18. Moving on to our accessories, we've got the Periaptive Wound Closure. Whenever you're downed, you automatically stabilize at the start of a turn. Great, barbarians don't really die. And whenever you are healed, you restore the maximum amount of possible hit points. We have a wild magic effect that heals us for 1d12, so that would be a free 12 hit points if we ever get it. As well as the fact that obviously any healing that we do get, maybe pair this build with a cleric. Just saying, it's going to work out really nicely for us because we're going to have that big HP pool. So yeah, pair this one with Shadowheart. I'm sure she'll be more than happy to deal with your shenanigans. Moving on, we've got the Callous Glow Ring. This allows us to do an additional 2 points of damage against creatures that are illuminated, so they could be standing in sunlight or be afflicted by radiating orb that we inflict. Now, it says 2 points of damage, but it's actually 2 points of radiant damage every time, so this is how we're going to get radiant damage on pretty much all of our attacks. So now, every time we attack, we have force, necrotic, and radiant damage being dealt at once. Very nice. And finally, I always put this on every single Wild Magic Barbarian build, and you should too. This is the Ring of Blink. As an action, you can cast Blink once per long rest, and you may be thinking, why? Well, because if we cast this at the start of combat using our action before we rage as a bonus action, Blink is not a concentration-based spell. Blink is a bit weird, because what it does is it allows you to, at the end of each of your turns, you roll a d20. On an 11 or higher, so basically a 50% chance, you vanish into the ethereal plane, and while there, you cannot be harmed or seen in this world. So it's a tanking ability, first and foremost, and again, blinking in and out of existence feels very on theme for a Wild Magic Barbarian. And when you do vanish, your presence here is a representation of the location you'll come back to. You can choose to teleport up to 6 meters. So it shows like a little orb that enemies can't really see, and that shows where you'll teleport to. So you can kind of teleport around the map and not really be hit. But again, you may be thinking, why? I mean, it's great for tanking. You can keep it up while raging, because it's not concentration based. So basically, you're just going to be teleporting around, disappearing while raging. Like, that's terrifying. Where did he go? Where did he go? Rah! And then you're dead. Wild Magic Barbarians are really fun flavor-wise, and again, just playing as a party face as well with a Barbarian is another fun thing to do. There's just a lot of fun to be had with Barbarian in this game, and I don't think people give it enough credit. But yeah, overall, the build does what it sets out to do. We've got force damage, radiant damage, necrotic damage, and we've got ways to kind of use all of them to inflict various effects. It's mostly the radiant that inflicts additional effects, but we do have ways of kind of playing off of most of the wild magic stuff in our inventory. For the camp clothing, we've got the Exviap armor, okay, and the footwear. None of it is dyed because I quite liked the natural colours of it, so yeah, that is the build. Overall, again, is it my most creative? I like to think it's pretty creative. Like, obviously the leveling scheme is simple, but I already did my rant about beauty and simplicity and going for single class builds and yada yada yada. Oh, you know me. You know how I tend to get. So I figured just making a build based on the Wild Magic Barbarian table's different damage types really felt interesting, and finding a way to get a solid and reliable source of all 3 damage types on a single weapon was fun. Now, obviously, Paladin exists. We could have gone for some sort of weird Wild Magic Barbarian Paladin mix, which I think I've done before. Correct me if I'm wrong. Which would have allowed us to Divine Smite, which yeah, okay, the bolstering magic that we get from barbarian could have restored our paladin spell slots, which would allow us to smite a little bit more. But overall, I don't know, I just wanted to focus on the barbarian stuff because I really wanted that unstable backlash. And while, yes, technically, we could have taken 2 levels of paladin, but that would have been like, what, 1 or 2 divine smites per long rest? It doesn't really feel worth it, guys, I'm not gonna lie to you. So, I, personally, quite happy with this. I think it is a simple, fun build that a lot of people can take advantage of. If you don't think that, well, that's entirely up to you. The only thing I would say that could change this build up, and I think this is going to be a common theme once patch 8 comes out, is a 1 or 2 level dip into Hexblade and making this a charisma-based character for those intimidation checks. Because obviously with Hex Warrior, we could use our charisma for the attack and damage without needing to go to level 3 of Warlock, meaning that we could keep unstable backlash. Yes, you'd be losing the feat, but honestly, for charisma-based attacks on this build, that could be pretty damn fun, so maybe consider that. But yes, that is going to do it for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.